Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I hope we're having a pleasant weather today from where we are right now. So, on behalf of the Asian Center and the University of the Philippines, we warmly welcome you to today's online roundtable titled East Asian Silk Road Hellenism in Antiquity, a prospect of cultural understanding. I am your host, Lem Magnaye, University Research Associate, the UP Asian Center. We are delighted to welcome participants joining us from various parts of the world. This lecture seeks to introduce two significant yet often overlooked periods of interaction during the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms. This period spanned over 3 centuries, from Alexander the Great's arrival in Central Asia up to the reign of the last Indo-Greek king, Strato III in Gandhara. Their interactions played a pivotal role in shaping Hellenism together with other local East Asian cultures. Today's discussion will explore the lasting cultural fusion initiated by these kingdoms and how the subsequent Kushan Empire preserved and institutionalized the Indo-Greek cultural elements in its urban systems, religious practices, and societal structures. Our speaker for today is Dr. Lucas Christopoulos, and he shall examine two primary waves of cultural transmission. The first wave occurred during the interactions of the Greco-Bactrian kingdoms with the Qin dynasty. This lecture examines the influence of Hellenistic military strategies, warfare engineering, and Greek-inspired sculptural and architectural styles in the Qin dynasty, as well as their contributions to the religious and philosophical developments of the period. The second wave, meanwhile, involves the Indo-Greek and Kushan developments of the period during the Western and Eastern Han, Wei, and Tang dynasties. Particular attention will be given to the development of Greco-Buddhism, the fusion of Greek and Buddhist artistic traditions, philosophies, and myths, and its spread along the Silk Road from the Central Asia and Japan all the way to China and Japan, shaping East Asian artistic and religious thoughts. This lecture will briefly address modern considerations of cultural understanding and clash of civilizations. By revisiting these ancient interactions, Dr. Christopoulos proposes that the cross-cultural exchanges of antiquity offer a valuable framework for resolving contemporary global conflicts by emphasizing how early civilizations, despite their geographic and cultural differences, found common ground in shared human experiences. So, before we formally begin, may we kindly remind everyone to keep their microphones muted during the sessions. If you have any questions for Dr. Christopoulos regarding his lecture, please type them in on the Q&A box below. There will be a designated open forum segment after the lecture where our speaker will be addressing your questions. So with this broader context in mind, we now move on to the formal opening of our program. To officially welcome us and situate this lecture with the work of Dr. Christopoulos, we are honored to invite Dr. Noel Christian A. Moratiria, Dean of the Asian Center, University of the Philippines, to deliver the opening remarks. So, Dean.
Okay, thank you very much, Lem. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for giving us an overview of the lecture, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. It is my honor to welcome everyone to today's virtual program entitled East Asia Silk Road Hellenism and Antiquity, a Prospect of Cultural Understanding. Despite the fact that the lecture in the main is expected to dwell on events that happened more than 2 millennia ago, it will provide us with valuable insights into addressing some of the concerns of more contemporary times brought about by, among other things, cultural chauvinism and xenophobia. May the stories of early intercultural understanding inspire us to establish closer links between societies and cultures, however seemingly disparate, as a strategy for resolving conflicts and averting war. This is even more imperative now than ever before because of the high degree of technological sophistication with which human lives have been destroyed. One only needs to cite the ongoing wars in different parts of the world, which have been characterized by the unscrupulous use of artificial intelligence and other technological tools not to save lives, not to improve conditions, as is often invoked, but to inflict the most serious harm possible and bring about murder and mayhem. Human culture thrives because of interaction, not clashes, contrary to Samuel Huntington's infamous thesis. And any civilization does not flourish by isolating itself from the outside world. The poet Ezra Pound wrote, and I quote, "The sum of human wisdom is not contained in any one language, and no single language is capable of expressing all forms and degrees of human comprehension." Substitute culture for language to emphasize how civilization cannot just be confined to any one culture. Civilization and culture are tapestries and amalgamations of diverse elements, some homegrown and the rest from without. As a bit of trivia, Pound himself was profoundly engaged in studies of classic Chinese and Japanese literature, despite the fact that he never set foot in Asia, perhaps an indication that one need not travel literally to draw inspiration from societies and cultures other than one's own. I therefore welcome I therefore welcome the opportunity, rather, for the Asian Center to host this very important lecture. May the ensuing conversation encourage us to study further this largely unexplored aspect of human history. Thank you very much. Back to you, Lem.
Okay, very well said. Thank you very much, Dean Moratilia, for setting the tone for today's discussion and for reminding us of the value of this event in relation with today's global intercultural development. So moving on to moderate this discussion, may we call on Dr. Alia Peleo, Assistant Professor at the UP Asian Center. So I now pass the mic to Dr. Peleo to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Lem. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to the lecture. Very interesting lecture, me coming from Central Asia. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Lucas Christopoulos. He's an internationally recognized scholar specializing in ancient civilizations with a particular focus on the historical interactions between Greek and East Asian cultures. He obtained his PhD in history from Hiroshima University in Japan, focusing on Hellenism in Chinese antiquity. His work examines the cultural exchanges that took place along the Silk Road, revealing how Hellenistic influences, including art, combat techniques, and religious symbols, became integrated into local traditions across Central Asia, Southeast Asia, India, China, and Japan. Dr. Christopoulos has also published numerous articles and papers that explore diverse topics such as Greco-Buddhist art, the influence of Greek combat sports, and syncretism between Greek and Chinese religious practices. Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas, for coming for our event, and I welcome you, and I please ask everyone to welcome Dr. Lucas Christopoulos. The floor is yours.
Hello, so let me try to share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Please make it full
okay.
screen.
So thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm very glad that I can talk about my subject at your university. So yes, my name is Lucas Christopoulos. I am half Swiss, half Greek, and I went to China at the age of 17. To study at Beijing Sports University. So my aim was to study Chinese culture in China. So I found myself as a teenager in China, so as a foreigner, and so everything was foreign to me in China. So I tried to find similarities in our culture. So first of all, I studied there at the university, then I travel around China. I study with different teachers from the countryside, traditional Chinese culture. And then slowly, while looking at similarities in Chinese and Greek culture, I was surprised to find some sculptures or some design that reminded me ancient Greece. So I decided to make an academic research on this. And so that's why I went to Hiroshima University and I did a PhD study about this topic. So in the beginning, nobody took me very seriously, but then I had Professor Victor Mayer of the University of Pennsylvania, who was a bit more open-minded than the other scholars that I've met, and he accepted to publish my article. So this started about 20 years ago. And then I moved on, and then all my theory, all what I was thinking about this cultural connection, so I came to find clues and informations in archaeological discoveries and in textbooks. So I went to Hiroshima University and I translated ancient Chinese books into English to understand. So books that are not available in the West or not translated. Plus, I used the work of the Western scholars, the early one like Orelstein and old archaeological discoveries in the Tarim Basin. And then I found very early links between the Hellenistic world and the Chinese world. So I will start first with the earliest contacts because it's before Alexander the Great. So we had historical links all over Eurasia. How come? So because during the Bronze Age, you had an aristocracy, a warlike aristocracy, driving war chariots, and they were mainly using bronze for weapons. So all this, if you see in China, the Shang Dynasty tripods and bronze culture, together with the Mycenaean one. So you have a whole line going from the Mediterranean to the northern part of China. And because to make bronze weapons, you must have tin and copper. They were looking forward to get mines, and they were making trade between those big empires. So Elam, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans. In the north of Bactria, there it was also the Andronovo culture, the Mac. So all this ancient culture, so Afanasievo culture, that were preceding all this period of Alexander, very old civilizations that were already trading bronze, so tin and copper from that time. But it was still a very distant relation between northern China, Central Asia, and the Mediterranean world. But we can find similarities in the way they were doing constructing the war chariots, the weapons. And so we can also find strange things that I found about writing. So even before the use of the creation, let's say, of the first finding of the oracle bones for the Chinese character, you have earlier scripts that has been found from the Shang Dynasty China on the right. So this is the early Tao Yangshi from 2000 to 1500 BC on the right side. And they are exactly the same one on the left. So this is found in the Dispilio Lake, that's northern Greece. But actually they were using this around the Black Sea. So it may have been a common communicating way of writing for all those people from the Andronovo and the Afanasievo culture to the northern part of Greece or around the Black Sea area. So because they look very similar to me and they must have been related. And it's not only about those writings. You have also the use of the coins. So before we had the round coins in Greece. So during the time of the Minoans, they were using battle axes for these small battle axes like the Labris. So this double battle axe, war battle axe in the Minoan world that were serving also as a currency between those aristocrats. And on the left, you have also this Zhou state currency, though they call it Pubi. So they were using a kind of spade-like currency, and then all these battle axe, they were serving as a symbolism for this aristocracy, and they were contact already in the beginning. So for example, the Mycenaeans, they were calling their Hittites the brothers. So between this leading aristocracy, so they were connected by war, and they had this kind of martial virtue. While the average people, they didn't have much power, and so there was a lot of human sacrifices, and so it was during the Bronze Age. So this is the first contacts we have. And then we had the Achaemenid Empire. So this is the Persians. So they were controlling from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. But then Alexander the Great waged a war between Greece and Persia. So he said he wanted to conquer the world. So he brought the East and the West much closer, and I will explain to you why, because it's not only about conquest, it's also about the personality of Alexander, because Alexander was a student of Aristotle, and so Aristotle was a student of Plato, and Plato had written this book, the Politeia, and then in there he described the perfect city. And Alexander had a very cosmopolitan ideal about the world. He wanted to construct cities on the model of Greece. And so everywhere he went, he decided to rebuild a new type of cities. With inside you had a gymnasium, so to practice wrestling or Greek athletics, as you had the Panhellenic Games in Greece. So he brought this kind of games to Central Asia. Of course, they had already before wrestling and this kind of athletic games, but it was not pushed the same as it was in Greece. And so when he arrived there, he constructed more these gymnasiums, and so to make a competition between people. So they had games happening, and the locals were not excluded. They started to take part in those international game competition, and you had also theater. So he had to construct a theater in each city where you had plays like you had in ancient Greece. So the same, and the locals also started to write and to play in those theaters and the marketplace. So this is the most important, because the core reason for this was those new roads. And with those new roads, you had a new trade going from Central Asia to the Mediterranean, going from one city to another. And because these cities, they became very cosmopolitan, you had a mixture of people from everywhere and travelers. It was much easier to do that than during the Achaemenid Empire. And also he brought a revolution in terms of technology, like warfare. His new warfare coming from the West brought all the knowledge, like in terms of engineering, creating war machines, the use of the long spear, sarissa, in warfare, the arbalest, and many other things, where he brought a kind of new era in Central Asia. So as I said before, for example, you have Alexandria Oxiana here, Ai Khanum in Afghanistan. So this is a reconstitution from archaeology. You had a theater. You see this half-shaped theater. You had palestra, the square-shaped building over there, where they were practicing combat sports and athletics. And you had also a marketplace where they were trading. So the roads and the trade started to expand. It was not only within the Persian Empire, but then it expanded to India, and we will see that it will expand to China as well. So one of the main things that Alexander said, and that will revolutionize the previous idea of Greek culture, is before the Greeks were considering themselves as Greeks, but Alexander had this cosmopolitan mind and say that there are no Greeks or barbarians, but only civilized and uncivilized people. So that made a huge difference with the previous cultures. So it opened the way to international trade and communication between people. So there were different religions in those cities, different philosophical streams, and that is very interesting, because you had people coming from different cultures in those cities, and they brought their own science. And because there were libraries, like the most famous is the Library of Alexandria, but you had also libraries and universities all along the road to Central Asia in those cities, even in India, in Taxila, where they were exchanging all those science and philosophical ideas from India to the Mediterranean, and they were connected, so they could have access to books and ideas coming from the end of the world. So that's why the mind of man flourishes during that time. So this lasted for a while, and then after Alexander died, came Seleucus. Seleucus was his general, so he had a very big kingdom going from India to Syria, basically. And then he made an alliance with the Indian king of the Mauryan dynasty called Chandragupta Maurya. So the alliance was matrimonial. So he was giving his daughter to Chandragupta. So it was a marriage agreement. All the Greeks located in the region of Bactria, so that is Central Asia, they could marry the Indian woman. So they could join the caste of the warrior caste, the Kshatriya. So those Greco-Bactrian could marry the Indian woman, and they were incorporated into the Indian caste. So in exchange, Chandragupta gave Seleucus 500 elephants, so he could use it as a warfare method against his other opponents in the West. But this is also of interest because all those Greek soldiers who followed Alexander the Great at that time, and all the pioneers who went there during the Seleucid Empire, Seleucid Kingdom, they were men. So they married local women. They were not bringing their wife or their woman from Greece. They were married local women. So all the second generation, or most of the second generation of Greco-Macedonian soldiers established in Bactria, they were half. So that's how the Greek culture could enter so easily into the local culture. So, for example, like Alexander's wife was a Sogdian woman. Seleucus' wife was also a Sogdian woman, so Iranian basically. So all those, let's say, Greeks that were called the Yavana or Yona in the region, they were in fact half local. So they could speak both Iranian, Sogdian, and Greek, or Indian, Prakrit, and Greek. So Greek was not a culture that was separated, and so you have the colons in one side and the locals in the other side. It was not like, let's say, the British Empire, where you have the Brits, they were staying alone in India, staying between themselves, or I don't know, the Spanish in the Philippines, where they were staying only between themselves. That was a bit different with the Greeks because they were completely mixed. So it will be like the Queen of England will be an Indian one, if you want to have a picture of this. So it was a very good balance. And so because those cities, they became very cosmopolitan and international, the trade went on very well. So trade of goods from India, and we will see from China as well. So that's the main point. So around 250 BC, the man you can see on the right down, his name was Diodotus. So he decided to make the Bactrian kingdom independent. So all the wealth and all the cities were belonging to him, all the gold and all the goods of Central Asia, very rich Central Asia at that time. And so he was not dependent of the Antiochid. So Antioch was the son of Seleucus, was also a half Iranian. But he cut from them and he made his own kingdom there. And Greeks were a minority. So most of them were half Iranian, half Greek, and also the local tribes. And so they started to expand. So that's here when I get a little bit in conflict with other scholars, because starting in 225 BC, to the invasion of Bactria by the Yuezhi around 120 BC, and so the Greeks were still there. They don't want to acknowledge a contact with China. So it's like China is a kind of psychological border that you cannot cross in 200 years. And I found, as I said in the beginning, in archaeological discoveries and in texts, that the Greeks indeed, the Greco-Bactrians met the Qin and went to China. And the distance by horse is only about 6 weeks passing through the Tarim Basin. So this is not long. You have all ways, oasis in the middle, and those ways were already open at that time. So when in 225 BC, Bactria become independent, they started to expand. And they had all very good connection with their neighbor. Is at that time that Ashoka, the first Buddhist king of India, erected his pillars, and he wrote in Greek also in the pillars. So he had very good contact. And the Greeks, as I said before, they were assimilated as locals in the Indian society, not as a foreigner, the Greco-Bactrians. And then you had the Indo-Greeks. So you see on the left, this is Menandros. Menander, this is the first Greek king who became Buddhist. He wrote a book, they wrote a book about him talking with an Indian monk and called the Milinda Prana. So it's one of the canon of Buddhism. It's very famous in Buddhist literature. In the middle, you have Demetrius, the Invincible. That's the one who conquered India because he had given his daughter to the last emperor of the Maurya and the last emperor of the Berenike. And the last emperor of the Maurya was Buddhist also, but he got killed by Shunga. Brahim man, so he came to pay back, and so he conquered back the Indian land as far as they went there later as far as Pataliputra. That's almost completely east part of India. And then you have until the last one is a Strato III. This is the great grandson of Menandros. So you had 5 generations of Greek Buddhist kings in northern India, Taxila, Sagala, Gandhara, and that's how you have all this culture of Buddhist, Greco-Buddhist, Helleno-Buddhist sculpture that came out before. So all this Greek Buddhist connection have been underestimated before that, even by the Western scholars, and it's not very understandable why. So this is the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. So I say the relation between the Greco-Bactrians and the Indians was very close. So you see all the city in the middle, some were built by the Greeks in the beginning in Gandhara, and some were built by the Indians. So this is the limit between let's say the Shunga, the Hindu one, and then the Buddhist ones were more on the northwest part of India. But the Greek rulers, they were very intelligent. They tried to have relations with both, with the Hinduist and with the Buddhist. Just the Buddhism was more like cosmopolitan, and Buddhists, they didn't accept the caste system so much. They were a lot more looking for a universalist way of thought. It was not an ethno-nationalist way of thought. That's why the Greeks took more on Buddhist easily than on Hinduism, but they had very good contact with the Hinduist as well. So some of the coins of the Greco-Bactrian kings, you have both the elephant as a Buddhist symbol or the bull as a Hinduist symbol. And many of them converted to Buddhism after the king that I explained before, Menandros. So one of them was Mahadamarakita. And also this Greek went to Sri Lanka with 3,000 monks. And so they built a stupa there. So also the Buddhist religion started to expand also because of those Greco-Bactrian monks. So in the beginning, Buddhists, they had 2 types of monks. Either they were Indian or they were Greek. So that shows how close the affinity was between those Greco-Bactrians and Buddhism. And then it spread in other places, in other parts of the world. So you can see here on the right side, you have Alexander the Great, represented as a protector of the Buddha, because so then those kings who were warriors, they protected Buddhism, so they became assimilated as the protectors of the Buddha. So Heracles as well will become Vajrapani, so the guardian of the Buddha. So they became completely assimilated with Buddhism. So, for example, Alexandria on the Indus was on the Indus River, so it was connecting all the way down the Indus to Patala. And so from there down the Indus, they could have connection with the Western world by sea. So it was all also about trading routes and trading communication, marketplace. So people could trade all over India products much easily between those cities, and they could have access of products from different places, from Central Asia, from India, and even further from the west. So even those ships then went through the Red Sea and connected with Alexandria in Egypt. So it was much more international than previously thought. Now let's go for China. So with my theory, I presume with the so rich Central Asia and so cosmopolitan and so international and developed Central Asia, it was not possible that they were not able to do 6 weeks horse to meet the Qing dynasty, the Chinese. Why not? It's only psychological, so people don't want to accept that there was such a kind of communication between civilization. So I was looking in the Chinese text in Chinese history, and I found the history of Chiyo. So Chiyo was a kind of half beast, half human. He became the god of war, and he had horns on his head. So horns on his head, of course, they have some Mesopotamian gods and legends with gods with horns on the head, but during the Han and Wei dynasty, they say that he had horn on his head, but he had like a kind of curly hair, and he created battlefield weapons like the long spear and the large crossbow. And all this indicates Alexander the Great, because Alexander was represented with horn on his head. So in Central Asia and through the Muslims, later he became Al-Qarnayn or Zulkarnain, so the horned one, because when he went to Libya and he went to the temple of Ammon, Zeus in Libya, he was told that he was the representative of Ammon on earth, so he started to wear 2 goat horns on his head. So from then on, when he went to the east, and he said he wanted to be the emperor of the earth, he was represented by everybody, by his followers and by the local tribe as horned. So wrestling also is attributed to Chiyo, wrestling competition. So that brought us also to Alexander the Great and the long spear. And in India is the same, Skanda. Skanda is the god of war in India for the Hinduist, and he's also having the long spear as a symbol. And the long spear was a characteristic warfare method of the Greco-Bactrians in Central Asia. And I found some Huaxiangshi, so that is a mural painting of a Tavrokafapsia. So this is a bullfighting in Han Dynasty China that you can see in the middle, so jumping over bulls. That also clearly connects with some ancient Greek gymnastic exercise, also with the acrobats. Acrobats came in China during the Han Dynasty through Alexandria, and they were called the Lycian people. So Lycian, I will see later that this is the people coming from the Alexandrias who were along the way in Central Asia and on the Silk Road. And you can see here on the right side, there is a soldier found in the western part of China. So he's a Greco-Macedonian warrior staying on one knee, and you can see the correspondent sculpture in the Qing dynasty. So with Yingzhang, so the first emperor of China, with his famous terracotta warriors. So then I pass through the Tarim Basin, so that is Central Asia, and then I analyze few discoveries made by Orel Stein long ago. So I presume they were more later, but some must have been hidden by the Chinese, or I don't know, but it must be much more than that. Or it just simply disappeared, I don't know. But there's a problem also, both from the Westerners and from the Chinese. So on one side, the Westerners, they don't really want to see this kind of Western civilization within China, and the Chinese also, they don't want to have another civilization originated from within his own border. But I will explain that things were all different. So you have the sample tapestry in the middle that is clearly an Hellenistic king. This is from the northern range of the Himalayan region. So he had the hairband of the Hellenistic king. He held a large spear. So because the king of that time, the Hellenistic kings, they were conquering lands, and they say conquer by the spear. So it was the symbolism of the conquering king. And so he's wearing a dress like a Parthian or a Sogdian dress, but the local Greco-Bactrians, they were also wearing uh, local dress. They were not dressing exactly similarly like the Greeks in Greece. On the left, you can see also another tapestry coming from Nia, that is even more east, lowland. So that's at the gate of Gansu. Hermes Psychopompos, so Hermes, conductor of souls. All those are fine tapestries on the Hellenistic style that have been found in the Tarim region. So that is today's Indian province. On the right, you see Athena Alkidimos, so thunder holding Athena. She was on the coin of Menandros. Yeah, this is the Buddhist Greek king that I have told you in the beginning. So he started to have this kind of design of Athena Alkidimos on his coin. And regarding the coins, the Huangtian, so the Chinese, the Qing dynasty, they started to make their coins round as the Greco-Bactrians and the Greek coins. So the Huangtian is connected to the Greco-Bactrian round coins. This is by Kazuo Enoki, a famous Japanese researcher who said that there is no point to see the link between the Huangtian, the Qing coin, and the Saka one, or the Yuezhi, but the Greco-Bactrian. And so we'll explain why there were direct contact between the Greco-Bactrians and the Qing. So we see also, so this is the Tarim Basin region, so Eastern Central Asia. And I think there is a lot more to discover within this region, but somehow it's still under the sand. So now we will go further east. We will go to the Qing dynasty itself. So at the time of Diodotus, the king who declared the independence of Bactria in 250 BC, it was the king Zhaoxiang, so the grandfather of Yingzhang, the first emperor of China. So I discovered something quite incredible in the Chinese text that I still don't know why nobody realized it before. So the mother of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, her name is Zhao Ji, so the princess Zhao, because she was coming from the country of the Zhao, so Zhao Ji, Princess Zhao. Then his wife, his concubine, the empress, was Hu Ji, the Empress Hu. But there is no country with the name Hu. Hu in Chinese at that time means barbarian, barbarians from the West. So Hu Ji was a Hu princess. She was not a Chinese princess, because Zhao Ji was from the Zhao, so Hu Ji was from the Hu. And so the marriage of Yingzhang, the first emperor of China, with Hu Ji was around 230 BC, because his son Hu Hai, who has also the name Hu, barbarian, was born in 230 BC. Okay, so where those barbarians were coming from, it must have been a significant military and influential power to give a princess to the Chinese emperor so that he take her as a concubine, as a wife. If not, it wouldn't make sense. And the closest region to the Qing dynasty was Gansu to the west, and we will see that there were traces of those Greco-Bactrians in Gansu too. And you can see on the sculptures, like on the right, you see the fine horses of the sculptures of the Qing dynasty. They are greater in technical and skills than the ones from the Han dynasty. Why? Because they had closer contact with the technology of the Greco-Bactrians, but very close, not distant. So you see on the left, you have two half Asian, half European people. So this is a reconstitution made by the Chinese archaeologists after they found two schools in the mass grave of Huhai. So after the first emperor Yingzhang passed away, Huhai became the emperor of China, and he killed all his brother, sister, all the concubines, so that he can be the only ruler. He was still young at that time; he was a teenager. And within those people found, we have two half Caucasian people. So those I don't create on myself is created by the Chinese archaeologist. So it confirms me in the idea that Hu Ji was a Westerner and Hu Hai was a half Westerner. Now, from where? As I say, I presume they are from the Greco-Bactrians. Now we can see also, if we go to the grandfather of Yinzhang, of Hu Hai, he's the first who created the phalanx. So the phalanx, of course, I don't see any other origin than the phalanx of the Greco-Bactrians, of Alexander the Great, because this is what made him win all over his Asian horsemen and conquerors, was the use of the phalanx. So King Zhaoxiang started to use the phalanx, and that's how he was also able to win against the Zhao and all the other country. So against the Zhao at the Battle of Changping, he made a real massacre. Then he buried alive all his soldiers instead of make them prisoners. But they were trained on the fashion of the Greco-Macedonians, with the long spear advancing and retreating. They were using also the side attacks. All this you can find in the Greco-Macedonian warfare maneuver. And you have also the purple of the ancients. So this is from Yingzhang. So from Yingzhang, we can have a much closer connection with the Greco-Bactrians. And I will explain why. Because most likely, after Diodorus, they send expedition in Gansu, and they built also cities there in Gansu that connected with Central Asia. So they were trading gold and silk already at that time from Gansu. So you can see the purple of the ancient of the terracotta warrior. So the purple that you can see in the middle statue is exactly the same that they were using for the Greek statues in Central Asia. Just that they didn't use the same ingredients because they didn't have the shells and so on, but they were using the same color. So the design was the same. Down you see the athletes of the Qing dynasty and the acrobats, who are built on a realistic model of Hellenistic technique that was absent, was not existing in China before Qing Shi Huangdi. So that's another element that shows us that there were a direct contact, because then you need artists and people with skill and technology to be able to teach this kind of thing. There was no internet at that time, so no distance possible to learn this. And so you had practically people who had to come there and to show and to teach, either with the long spear of the phalanx method or with the sculptures of the Qing dynasty. And curiously, this is also during the Qing dynasty that you had military parades who started to appear for the military, and wrestling contests. So the Qing started to develop the wrestling contest as a military training, as the Greco-Bactrians had in Central Asia. All these came at the same time under Yinzhang, around 230 BC. And you had also artillery machines, so large crossbows. So this we can see in the Chinese text related to Trio, the horned god. Artillery machines like the one used by the ancient Greeks already by Philip of Macedon, so the father Alexander the Great, where he had hired a great deal of engineering to improve his army engineering skills. So they had towers to attack the cities, big catapults, large crossbows. So all this was part of the engineering of warfare. And Kazuo Enoki, also the Japanese researcher, say that the supremacy that Yin Zhang had all over his other opponents in the Chinese lands was because of his contacts with the Greco-Bactrians, but it was not just a far influence. Again, it was a contact from Gansu. And there's also another story. So that's the story of the 12 chryselephantine 12 gold and bronze statues brought to the palace of the Qing emperor. So they came from a city called Didao in the past, Lintao. It's written Lintao, but the old name is Didao, the way, the road of the Di. That's in Gansu. So to make 10 statues in gold and bronze of 10-meter high, 12, sorry, statues of 10-meter high need about 8 to 10 years. So that will correspond to the venue of the Greco-Bactrians in Gansu around 250, 230 BC. Because the marriage with the Huji happened in 230 BC, I presume they started to build up these statues around 230 BC. And Alexander the Great did the same in India before. So when he had to stop and his armies went back because they were exhausted, he erected 12 statues in Punjab, so northwestern India, and after he went back. So same here to limit the border of the Hellenistic world. Diodotus made build those 12 statues of the god, together with an alliance with Yingzhang and the Qing dynasty. So that's why they were still a Greco-Bactrian presence in Gansu, directly connecting with the Qin. So within those 8-10 years until 2021. So when Qin Shi Huang, so Yingzhang became the emperor of all China, he took those statues from Didao. And again, Didao, we can relate it to Diodot, Diodotea. So they usually, this typical thing for the Hellenistic ruler. When they built a city, they give their own name to the city. So we have Ephemia for King Ephemios, and Demetrius for King Demetrius. So Didao could have possibly been Diodotea as well. But however, after he bring those statues back to his own palace, because he became the emperor of China, and apparently he broke his ties with the Greco-Bactrians of Gansu, then even Huhai himself is written in the Han books that he lost contact with his ancestors. So of course, that's not his Chinese side ancestor, but it's his Greco-Bactrian one. So he brought those statues of 10 meters high to his mausoleum. And they call those statues Wenzhong. So it's the first time in Chinese literature that you have the term Wenzhong. Tomb guardians. So this is human statue mainly that guarded the tombs, appearing also surprising, not surprisingly for me, but during the Qing dynasty. And Wenzhong, the translation, if you take those two characters, will be like ancestor. So the Greeks were calling these statues that were protecting the tombs progonos, ancestor. So actually the meaning of progonos and Wenzhong is exactly the same. And later during the Tang dynasty, but this is for the second wave when Buddhists arrive, you had Wenzhong who were like half Heracles, like you see this one, and guarding the tomb of the Tang dynasty emperors. It may have been to build the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang influence, and the engineering architects also similar to the ones like the Halicarnassos, who had also Wenzhong around, and it was a magnificent mausoleum. So it may have been that Yingzhang will also have to So we'll need to get a very good and artistic mausoleum with influence from this new kind of architecture. So here, yes, Lingtao, Didao in Gansu. So you see here, I made a reconstitution. So Gansu is really connecting Eastern Central Asia, and the Qing. So they brought those 12 statues back in the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huangdi from Didao, Diodote, I presume. Again, about the mausoleum, so you can see here, this is the mausoleum of Amphipolis in northern Greece. There's also the northern Greece, and that's also a Greco-Macedonian tomb, and it's round. You see a bit like the tumulus. You can see also in some tombs in Korea and in Japan. So the tomb was on there. On the top, you had the lion, also a kind of Wenzhong who was protecting the tomb, and the tomb was made in three sealed gates. And the tomb of Yingjiang, the mausoleum of Yingjiang, it is written in the Hanshu that it was made also of three sealed gates. So the construction method was the same: three sealed gates with the Greco-Macedonian king's tomb and the mausoleums, and three sealed gates with the tomb of Yingjiang, the first emperor of China. In the first emperor of China, they say that in the tomb they had some automats, hydraulic system. So again, the hydraulic system was developed in Alexandria. So very easy to understand that all this technology traveled also all the way to China and the Silk Road. Then to find today's similar traces, because I say, okay, this is a past. Is there something today that we can find that are similar with the ancient Greco-Bactrians and the locals? So here, there in Gansu, in the place where I told you where they built those statues, and there were supposedly this Greco-Bactrian city, they are the Tuzu people. And the Tuzu people are half, they are Mongolic actually, but some DNA tests have been made, and they have 17% Greek DNA. And also they are doing dances and worship that are similar to the Dionysian rituals of the past. So this is also an indication that those people are related to the ancient Greco-Bactrian, the Tuzu, or the Mongolic Mongols. They became the Wei Dynasty Xianbei people, some of them, the Western Xianbei. Okay, I will try to go fast because the time. So Li Xuan, it was the old name of the Greeks from the Western Han. Then he became Da Qin. So Da Qin, again, the Eastern Han, they started to call the Romans Da Qin. Why would they use the character Qing, like the previous dynasty, to call a foreign country the Greater Qing? Of course, it's because they knew Panchao, Pangu, well, they get executed for that, but they knew that there were a link between the Qing and the Greco-Bactrian. So that's why they called the dynasty the Greater Qing. Then it became Dacia for Bactria, Da Yuan for Fergana. And then when they started to found the new Greek state in 1830, the Chinese started to call Greece Silla. But before that, they all called Greece, Rome, until the Qing dynasty, early Qing dynasty, Ming dynasty they called it, until the reign of Emperor Chenzhou of the Ming dynasty, it was called the Daqing. So this contact went down and up. I say from Gansu, Lingtao, it went down to the Yunnan province of China. So this, I recommend you an article from Chen Jianwen from Taiwan. He also make like long distance relationship, but you can see here on the left, this is Irano-Hellenistic representation. So they wear a cataphract protecting gears, and representation is like the one of Mithras, the Parthian one, leather Parthian. The Parthian was also Hellenized, so it was a mix of Iranian and Greek culture. And you can see the weapons, the helmets, the actual cult seems to be the snake, the chthonic, the underground chthonic snakes, and the sacrifice to the sun was connected with Zoroastrian and Hellenistic practice connected with those Greco-Bactrian colonies that went as far as Shaanxi in the north, trading gold and fork down to the Dian Kingdom in Yunnan, China. Then fast, Ho Chi Minh. So when the Han Wudi went to conquer the region further west after the Qing dynasty, they found a city called Xiutu. Xiutu means ending war, and all the kings of the Greco-Bactrians were having the name of Soter, savior. So this king name was Xiutu, finishing massacre, so kind of savior. And they found a statue in gold there of 3 meter high. So that's in the same region where they found the 12 golden statue, but even further west. So this statue was there made to worship heaven. And there's a painting in the cave number 323 in the Moga, in the Moga cave in the Western China, near Tuhuan. And you can see the face of the statue, and doesn't look like a like a Chinese emperor or something else. So the only ones who were making golden statues of 3 meters and more high were the Greco-Bactrians at that time. We don't have any more example. So I was confronted with the Chinese professor who told me, no, but this is Han Wudi. But I tried to convince that this is not the face of Han Wudi. This is a Westerner. And the Ho Chi Minh, the general who conquered the Western land, on his tomb, you have Pegasus, Tianma. So Tianma, the wing horse coming from Central Asia. So you can find influence also in many Han Dynasty sculpture, like the horse of Gansu in bronze, which is the exact same representation of the one on the coins of Cratidis, the king of Bactria. So that's to say how Western and Eastern culture mix together. Then you have, of course, Gandhara, how the Greek sculpture influence. So here on the left, you have Heracles as Vajrapani, Tihe, who became the goddess of wealth in India. In Japan, as far as Japan and Korea, you have the Deva Gobujo in Nara, Nara at the end of the Silk Road. So in the middle, you can see Demetrius, the king who conquered India. But so because he became a protector of the Buddhist faith, he was considered by the Buddhists as a protector of Buddhism. So he became this divinity in Japan, the Gobujo theater. So theater you have in the music, a lot of similarities between ancient Greek music and modern one. During the Meiji era, they made research, and so they were not able to understand why ancient Japanese music and ancient Greek music, as the hymn of Apollo, had exactly the same melody and the same notes, but then they didn't provide any explanation. So you have also these masked festivals who are coming from Central Asia along the Silk Road, the Drunken King. Again, down you can see Vajrapani in Korea on the left with the lion skin on his head. The goddess Amaterasu, the myth of the cave, also similar to Dionysian cult of Artemis, Babo, showing private parts. So the stories in the Indo-Greek myth passing through Japan are numerous. Not only one, there are many. So we can make the connection with them. So this dates with the coming of Buddhism, Greco-Buddhism. So Greco-Buddhism is the second wave. The first one that I said was the one from the Qing dynasty. Then you had the cut with the Han dynasty. And then after when Buddhists came, then all this Gandhara art that was already mixed with the Kushana. The Kushana were not Greek. They were the Yuezhi who went to Central Asia. Then they adopt both Iranian and Hellenistic and Indian culture. So it became a mix. And all this culture went then to Japan and Korea. But you can still see the traces of this Indo-Greek myth and culture in Japan and in Korea today. In Southeast Asia, we still have also, like you see here on the left, is in Vietnam, central Vietnam. So this is coming more from the southern part of the Himalaya road. Down is the Sri Lanka. So you have Mahadamaraksita, who came down with the Yona, with the Greeks, and built stupa there. In the middle, this is the Emerald Buddha. So the Emerald Buddha is in Thailand, in a Buddhist temple in Thailand. And he was made by the Nagasena, the student of Mahadamaraksita and teacher of the Greek Buddhist king Menandros. So you can see the statue still on a temple in Thailand. And on the right, this is the relics of the Buddhist Greek monk who went to Sri Lanka, Mahadamaraksita, but also in Bangkok. So he has in one temple in Bangkok, he has his relics there. So to say, all this Indo-Greek culture traveled also Southeast Asia, as far as Laos, Thailand, Bangkok. And I saw in some text from Laos where they speak about this history of Menander and so on. So it seemed to have been quite important for the Southeast Asian, this Indo-Greek part, as transmitted in their own culture as early Buddhist development. So now, because the time is short, a long time ago, I've been reading this book of Samuel Huntington. I liked it a lot. It was A Clash of Civilization. So unlike this old civilization that we talked about before during the Hellenistic time, where it was very cosmopolitan, people were respecting each other. My religion was my own business. My philosophy was my own business. Now you have these blocks. So, okay, you should belong to one block. So either you are in the block of Jesus, okay, so you have to follow this group. So they gather together and they don't have consideration for other ones. So supposedly they're going backwards from that time. So you see, at that time they were trade and respect. One god could be Shiva, but he also could be Dionysos. It could be both, and it was accepted as both. Now those new leaders appearing here and there, they claim a divinity from heaven, and they think they have a messianic purpose in their leadership in their government, and their messianic leadership is to clash with others who are not like them and go over them. But this is not new. You can see here on the left, this is Constantine the Great. So he's the first one who unified the Roman Empire under Christianity. So he could gather all the people from different origin. That time Hebraic, because then they included also the ancient testament, so Jesus, and so the Greeks, everybody was around this Christianism. So he was empowering Christianity, the mind of people and the power of people to drive them. Down is an Indian wise man, and right is Kim Il-sung from North Korea, also empowering the mind of the people. And in the middle is the planet of the apes. So like when the monkey came, and then they gave their own explanation to the world and divinity as well. So all this relate to books. So people grow up with a book, brainwashed with a book, then they grow up, they want the world is reality according to the book they read from the beginning. But if you study Silk Road history and all those civilizations, you see that all those blocks are not monolithic, and all elements are coming from different parts of the world, Asia, the West, and it's an amalgam, many particles of different elements. It's not only one. So basically, you don't have to belong to one in particular, because you can find everything from the other part of the Silk Road. And you have also AI. So I don't know how AI will turn. If AI will become a kind of an autocratic god, then it's even more dangerous, because it can gather all the information and it can command your wallet and your freedom too. So it's because we are mammals, so we have the same social bondings, hierarchical societies, empathy. So we need a team leader. We need how to say. Also, when we grow up, we need our mother, we need father, we need family. Then we need the group, the alpha male. And for human, we need the God. So the God is directing us and leading us to the truth, to light. So if we have a man that empowers this idealistic way to the light, so we are very happy, and we can follow him until death, ideologically or spiritually. So I will finish with those two last pages. So in those ancient Hellenistic cities, you have cosmopolitanism, many nationalities together, no ethnic exclusivity, intellectual curiosity. You were curious to other countries, philosophical universalism, starting to understand other philosophies, and religious syncretism. Different religions were side by side, finding answer, finding solutions. So for last thing here, so I made a question about modern society. So 6 questions that you can maybe look later because we are with time. So what I found is like modern materialism and capitalism and monotheism. We have this in our modern societies, but within Greek atomism and Buddhism, all this line is missing. So I think it's this that we have to insert in our modern societies to be closer to the ancient Hellenistic time with multicultural and cosmopolitan cities and a universal mind rather than monolithic ideologies and religious thought. Okay, I think that's all I had to say. It's 1 hour about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas. That was an incredible lecture, and I think it's really exciting to hear that, especially at this time. You're right. When you finished your lecture in the last slide, showing what actually the world coming now, and I think it's important to really study history now, especially ancient history, because whatever we think is new, we find out. For example, now we discuss Middle Corridor and the connectivity between China and Europe and how Central Asia plays the role in that to connect. We can actually see that in ancient time, Sogdiana, with its vibrant ancient civilization in Central Asia, if those of you who are not familiar, Sogdiana is located between the Amudarya and Sirdarya rivers. In what is modern day would be Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. And it was really an important connector at the time. And as we know, the Alexander the Great actually chose Samarkand, which was called Marakanda, as his regional post. He even married, I think, Sogdianan, Greco-Bactrian later princess, right? Roxana, I think her name was, if I'm not mistaken. And she was Sogdian, I think Sogdian noblewoman. And by solidifying the local alliances, the Greek administrators were able to obviously connect not just to Central Asia, but India and China and further into the region. And I absolutely agree with you that the connection definitely was there. We just need to study it. And if you ever go to Samarkand, for those who are in the audience today, you will actually see the Greek influence settlement there, because in Samarkand currently the archaeological finding, particularly in Afrasiab. Afrasiab is a sort of ancient city there. And in Afrasiab, there was quite a number of Hellenistic potteries found. There is also Marakanda itself, Samarkand now, was found that the city itself was sort of structured as a typical Hellenistic acropolis of the time, fortified, and it had a classical grid planning and other urban structures that we associate with the Greece. Also, there was, I think there was a research on the bricks, right? Because the bricks that was found, they were the not the round or some oval bricks, but actually was the bricks that was structured in a more rectangular familiar form. All right. Now, with all that excitement, I would like to ask questions that we have from the audience first. But I'm quite excited, being from Central Asia, about this topic generally. And let's see how much our international, but also Filipino public would be interested in this topic. First question we have from Patrick Duresa. And he's asking, is it possible that the famous horse, red hair, in the romance of the Three Kingdoms descended from the Firgana horses that were raised in the Greco-Bactrian kingdoms, since those horses were described as blood-sweating horses? That's a very interesting, very particular question. Dr. Lucas, would you like to respond to that? Because I have no idea.
Yes, I see. There's a lot of different theories about this Chinese source mentioning this bloody horse hair from Central Asia. But one thing is for sure about those horses. So when Han Wudi, the Chinese emperor, conquered this area, they were very eager to get the horses from Fergana. Fergana maybe is your region there, Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. So Fergana horse were very famous. They called them Wujima or Tianma. So Wujima, the without limit horses. They were bringing those horses because they were better in battle than the Mongolian horse. Because the horse from Mongolia, they were shorter, while the horses from Central Asia, they are taller and they are more efficient in battle and they are more elegant. So you can see also in Gansu, the art representing the horses is significant because it was a very big of a very big importance for the Chinese too. Those horses coming from Central Asia, so you can see it from the Qing dynasty already to the Han dynasty. So I say the Gansu horse, the famous one, he is made also from the same artistic style of the coin of Eucratides. And if you see the Bank of Afghanistan, the symbol of the Bank of Afghanistan also still have the same symbolism of those Greco-Bactrian horses, actually very famous. But the Saka, the Sogdians, and they all used those horses before the arrival of Alexander, and they already had before also contact through the steppes with the Chinese. So this is an old story. These famous horses.
That's true. Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas. And it's true, horses been in the culture of nomadism for quite some time. And I think also it's interesting even to connect to my own country. In Kazakhstan, there's a if you ever go to Kazakhstan, there is a golden man or Altyn Adam. It's iconic sort of 5th, 4th century BC archaeological finding of Saka, Scythian warrior unearthed. Is just next to Almaty city. There was a kurgan that was unearthed, and there we can see actually there are quite a number of Hellenistic art was part of it, especially this animal style gold work. I think practiced by Saka and Scythian artisans, right? And they actually integrated, seems to be Greek classical techniques and motifs as well. But yes, the horse culture, absolutely, you're right. It's quite ancient, even before Alexander the Great came to Sogdiana. The horses were used in Central Asia, and Fergana being really, it's a current Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. That's three countries that share Fergana Valley. And I think till now, Fergana is quite important for all the geopolitics and trade and all the connections that's happening currently between China and Europe through the Middle Corridor. Now I think there is a railway project going there. But even in ancient time, that was the corridor through which there was a lot of interaction, there was a lot of socialization, exchange of different objects for warriors, but also for civil life. It's quite exciting, really. Okay, let's move to the next question. And here we have the question about the unity between Western and Eastern cultures. It's coming from Bien Edward Nura, and asking, is the unity between Western and Eastern cultures feasible in our current geopolitical situation? In other words, the world is becoming so difficult now that we're even questioning, is it possible still to reconnect the way we reconnected in ancient time when we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have trains, but we had horses? Other shared cultural properties in the former Silk Road can help in globalization and allow room for dialogue. In other words, are we optimistic about the dialogue and interaction, or shall we be very pessimistic? What do you think, Dr. Lucas? Because you study ancient time, but seeing what's happening in the contemporary time, do we have a source of optimism from studying history?
Yes, I think I thought about these questions many times, because I was confronted only when I was living abroad for since I'm 17. So I try say, how can we conciliate our different culture in something common? Everything seems to separate us, and even now our leaders want us to be more different and more separated. And so I think the common denomination and the root culture, which is very ancient and connects East Asians with the West, is Buddhism. Because in Buddhism, it's a very open and cosmopolitan and universalist theory that is already everywhere in Asia, and they share everything both with the atomist of ancient Greece, theory, way of seeing the world, It's not a unique reality of the world. There are many cause and consequences. And the Chinese Taoists have also something similar. So in the future, as they will get rid of those hardcore dogmatic leadership and religions, they may go back to individualism, not in the sense of capitalism, that is, I make a lot of money as I want and I don't care about the rest, but as individual development from philosophy. So at the individual level, so I think in Buddhism, in Taoism, and in atomism, philosophy in ancient Greece, we have all the answer to those questions.
Thank you very much. That's probably quite true. Actually, for Buddhist statues, you can see coming from Central Asia as well. We of course know the Buddha statue in Afghanistan, famously destroyed by Taliban, or infamously, probably. But we also have Buddhist inscriptions just next to Almaty city, next to Ili River, and often tourists go there. And me, as a young person, often went there for a picnic. And when you have a picnic just next to the Ili River, you can actually see the Buddha's inscriptions, the drawings of Buddha on the rocks that coming from really old time. And that's true. The Buddhism connects East and West, can connect quite well. But also even from Christianity, we know that Sogdiana hosted later, much later, after Hellenistic time, already after Roman time, just before Arabs came. There was also a group of Nestorians, right? Nestorians, those who ran away from the Byzantium and all the politics of Christianity at the time. They found refuge in Central Asia. And I think there was even research done that Nestorians reached China as well. And there were some inscriptions found, I think, in China that Nestorians went as far as China. So in other words, and Christianity and Buddhism and later Islam as well has an opportunity to connect, not just to divide, but also to connect. Right, we have other questions here. We have a question from anonymous participant. Could the Kushan Empire be considered one of the earliest examples of cultural globalization? Kushan Empire. I am not an expert in that. Would you know any answers? Is it an
Yes.
example of globalization?
Yes. So first of all, as we saw, the Indo-Greeks and the Greco-Bactrians, they were already global, so from the Mediterranean to China. And then they were followed by the Kushana. So actually the Kushana, it's people coming from Mongolia, the Yuezhi. So it's a tribe. They had to escape another tribe called the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu is a Mongolian tribe that were attacking the Chinese and also Gansu. So they moved through Gansu to Central Asia. Actually, we don't know if they are related to the Tokharians, because if they will be Tokharians, they will be speaking Tokharian, not Iranian. But well, when they arrive in Central Asia, they started to get the customs of the local Irano-Greek customs, and they changed the alphabet. So they use a Greek alphabet to write Iranian language. They continue Indo-Greek Buddhist culture. They started to build stupas, and then they expanded at their turn. So they made a continuation of the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek culture, but they developed it even more, and they had contact with Rome. Then you have a Roman artist came. You can see, for example, the lying Buddha that you can see in Thailand and so on is very influenced by the Roman Augustus sleeping art. And they were they were feeling very close with the Romans because they were keeping this heritage of the ancient Indo-Greek. And at that time, even Alexander, he was ever revered as a god by the Kushana too. So all this mixture of Indo-Greek and the Persian culture was not very distant and separated there in Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, because you had people coming from different ethnicities and different religious group or different backgrounds, but they were all in the same kind of universal and cosmopolitic cities. And they were continuing what was previous before them. It was cut after the Kushana with the Sassanid Persian, because the Sassanid Persian, they were much more monotheistic. It was different with the Sassanid Persians. Then after they cut with the past, no? And the Parthians too.
Yeah, quite interesting, really, quite interesting. Because Kushan Empire also, I think what comes to my mind is wrestling, right? Because the sort of if you cross pollination, right, of sort of different styles of wrestling, and what came out of the Greek influence as well, and
Yeah.
the Greco-Bactrian influence. And was there some archaeologists that uncovered some carved
Yes.
stones, I
So
think? Or, yeah.
they found votive weights. So they were offering weights to Heracles Vajrapani. So you had on these weights, stone weights. You have the drawing of Heracles Vajrapani, and they found one, though dating from the Kushan kingdom, written in Prakrit, say Minandrasa. Minandrasa is Menandros, so this is the Greek name. Because at that time, both in Parthia until 100 AD and in Central Asia, there was this social system called the gymnasiarch. So in the city, you had somebody assigned to the gymnastic activities, and mostly it was still Greeks who were there and assigned. Well, but you had all the people from different places. They were already doing sports competition. And in the West, the Olympic Games started to go down, and the champions in the Olympic Games at that time were all people from Asia, not anymore people from the West.
Thank you very much. It's really very interesting because till now, now we have a revival going in Central Asia with the World Nomad Games, and I know that the World Nomad Games wrestling is quite important part of this the World Nomad Games, and understanding that that wrestling tradition is very ancient and it came from all the way from Greece and was developed further by local basically civilizations and local groups. It's
Yeah.
quite amazing.
Well, at that stage, I don't call it Greek anymore, but you can find Greek elements in this because it was a complete mixture. For example, in the Nadam Festival of the Mongolians, they attach red bands on the hats for the victors, and this is also an ancient Olympic tradition. So each victory, he had to attach a red band on his arm or on his head. So this is also a link with the ancient Olympic Games there in
Yeah,
Central
that's
Asia.
true. That's true. And wrestling generally, it's all over Central Asia, Mongolia, but also we know that there are a lot of Mongolian sumo wrestlers now in Japan, right? And we have a lot of
Mm,
people from Central Asia also trying their luck in sumo wrestling as far as Japan, right? So wrestling really
yeah.
is quite a
The
tradition in Asia.
The oldest archaeological found for wrestling in China is Keshangzhuang, that's north of Xi'an in Shaanxi province. And this is two twins, I think Saka people, but the representation is Hellenistic. So you have the goose on the top. I mean, you can check the Keshangzhuang bronze wrestlers. I wrote an article about it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that's true. The Bronze civilization itself, with the Afanasieva culture and Andronova culture, been also quite a connector for East and West as well, I think, even as far as that time, right? Right, let's move to the question because we can have a very interesting conversation between both of us, but we have to see the questions from the audience. Right, we have another questions here. Given the limited surviving records from the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, how do historians or researchers distinguish between direct influence and parallel cultural developments? In other words, how do we know if it's the influence or is it developed by itself in that place, especially that the records are quite limited?
Okay. So what we have to think and see realistically is those cities, those new cities, they were built on the ancient Greek mode. So as I said before, they had a gymnasium, a theater, and a marketplace. Now, from then on, the Greek were a minority, but they were participating to the cities with technology, engineering, art, or whatever. But the locals, they were also bringing their own art, culture, and thing, and they also developed it their own way. So we cannot say it's or one or two. It's simply a mixture of both local culture and Hellenistic culture, Greek culture.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. Right. So we have what level, Marvin Tihad asking, what level of heritage protection is being implemented by UNESCO or ICOMOS despite armed conflicts happening in this Silk Road region? I think the armed conflict we're talking about is Afghanistan only, probably. That
Yes,
what we're
I,
talking. So what sort of
well,
protection do we have?
Afghanistan is not a good example. So Ai-Khanum, so Alexandria Oxiana in Afghanistan, they blow up most of the Buddha, or they crossed the border to Pakistan, and they sold the Buddha on the black market in Pakistan, most of them. So you can find some of those pieces abroad in private collections if they don't have been broken by the Taliban. Also, in other places you can find. So in other countries like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, you have museums, you have archaeological sites. There is more protected than in some countries. But unfortunately, Afghanistan was a very important place for Hellenistic culture there. But there's not much more to be seen now. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Actually, it's quite sad. And me,
Mm.
coming from Central Asia, also seeing when the war was still happening and the destruction that happened there is just enormous. I think, especially to the Hellenistic, but also even later, even more recent Bukhara Khanate and all other things that existed in the sort of northern Afghanistan. But you're right, Samarkand and Bukhara, and also Hiva and Fergana. There are areas in Central Asia that have quite a lot of protection from the government and international authorities as well. And if you ever travel to Samarkand, Bukhara, you can enjoy quite a lot of history there, including ancient history. Right. So let's see other questions. Now we're returning to the current conditions. There are two questions from Adrian Benedict, who asks the first question: do you see a revival of the East Asian Silk Road through China Belt and Road Initiative, EU ASEAN Strategic Partnership, EU's Global Gateway, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization? Are they really historically conscious as far as ancient civilizations, or they are not? And the second question, I'll read it again so that maybe you can combine those two questions in an answer. A second question: what are the lessons we can learn from antiquity to strengthen today's cultural exchanges, educational networks, scientific cooperation, and also economic relations between Europe and Asia? I think that's quite important question, because in the current situation that we have, I think Europe and Asia has to find way to reconnect again, and maybe Central Asia will be the center of it, trying to connect everyone, with Kazakhstan trying to do multi-vector policy towards everyone. What do you
Yeah.
think, Dr. Lucas?
So I think, first of all, that it's good that countries that were left behind by the West, like China or countries in Central Asia, Russia, they're able to build up trade contacts, the new Silk Road, because that's a continuity from history. They were wealthy and they were a rich culture in the past, so they grew up again. This is normal. But again, it's a block against block. So for the Chinese, is a kind of revival of the Han Dynasty expedition or Tang Dynasty expedition to Central Asia. Uh, so it has also a connotation of money, power, and so on. So if we can combine all these new Silk Roads with a really intercultural approach in history, philosophy, and civilization, by having more multidisciplinary branches in universities. I mean, like me in my topic, because I touch different topics as far as China is ancient Greece, I'm not understood by most of the scientific community, because they study only Greece, or they study only the Iranian world or Asia, while in the past they were studying about everywhere. And so to have a clear understanding of the situation, especially in Central Asia, because Central Asia is in between two worlds. So Central Asia could have a very important role to play in the future for an understanding between the Eastern and Western civilization. So as I said, to have universities that deal equally with all those culture and provide ideas, solution, and so yes, it's a promising future for the East. Why it's not a promising future for the Western part of the world. Yes, in this aspect.
Yes, thank you very much. That's a bit hopeful and more optimistic about the future, especially for the current new generation of young people. I think we have more than ever opportunity to travel, to see, to talk to each other through different channels online. Doesn't matter where we are, and also I think cosmopolitanism generally, as we see it now, it was also in ancient time because I think in Central Asia, again, cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, which ancient Marakanda for Samarkand, it was really thriving, culturally diverse centers of sort of trade and architecture and also advanced our agriculture as well, because I worked actually on RLC and how horribly it was diminished to almost to nothing with the Soviet agricultural practice in Sirdarya and Amudarya River Basin. But in ancient civilization, they didn't make the lake disappear. You know, they still had agriculture. They still was able to have a channel system or canal system of
And
irrigation.
also, if you talk about other civilization coming, so then when the Uyghur came and invaded Bactria, they didn't destroy the local Buddha sculpture or the local temples. They studied and then they adapted it. And you see
That's
now
true.
when one country is invading another, there's no respect. They bombed the church, they bombed the mosque, they bombed I don't know, whatever else, or the statue like the Taliban's. There's no connection between A and B. What we must find is these intercultural connections as you have in those cities in Central Asia in the past.
Yeah, that's true. So that's something to learn, I think, because currently with the sort of rise of tensions around the world and the conflictuality, we can see how the cultural heritage is destroyed so easily, and that's quite sad to see because we've grown in our technology, but we haven't grown in our understanding of the kind of civilizational longue durée history, you know, going into the long history and seeing how whatever we do, someone before us have done it probably hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And for that, we have a question also from Marvin Tejada. He's asking what kind of sanctions is being imposed for the destruction of heritage artifacts by countries who made these damages. In other words, now we have wars still going. You know, we have war in Ukraine. We have also war going in West Asia now with Iran, and Iran has obviously a lot of cultural artifacts. And are there any sanctions? It's a very difficult question, I think, to answer because
No,
in Syria also there was hardly any sanctions, I think, were done on anyone, right? Lucas, what do you think?
No, because now, as we saw before in the presentation, the political leadership by definition doesn't respect the other culture. So, and all the treaties, all the protections that have been before we thought, okay, only the Talibans can blow statues, but now we see that it's not only the Talibans who can blow statues, temple and cultural properties, but modern Western states as well. So this is alarming.
Yeah, that's quite sad to think. So, in other words, it's not just the theocratic, autocratic states that cause damage, but also democratic states now also cause damage to the cultural artifacts and the heritage that goes to the ancient period. And probably that's one of the sort of bigger questions for the next generation. We have to write about it. We have to demand the response to that, and we hope that there will be some real action, sanctions, legal sanctions done to those entities that destroyed the ancient or medieval civilization, and artifacts associated with that. Right. I think that's about. Let me see if we have any other questions. Right. So I think we answered more or less all of the questions that we have in the question box. Well, any other comments for all of us that we have here and from also Asian Center faculty? Me, as a Central Asian, of course, I'm quite excited about Greco-Bactrian conversation, and we can continue it for longer because I still think that the current geopolitics and current situation that we have and the development of middle corridor, particularly between China and Europe, that goes through Central Asia, it reminds us not just about the Silk Road as such, but also generally the geographic importance of that area in the center. We call it Central Asia, but there are other names for that. You can see Sogdiana from the past, right? And more recent, it was also the area of Bukhara Khanate, right, in the south. That when you mentioned Xinjiang and that area in where you found the ancient artifacts, there was a connection before until recently, until 19th century, that the Central Asia and the Xinjiang was quite well connected, and there was a lot of exchanges, obviously, and the shared culture, shared languages that till now exist, but we're divided by the borders now, right? By the by the sovereignty and modern borders.
So I think now what we should have, so take the example of the ancients. In the ancient times, so all those people, they were able to have cosmopolitan cities with different currents of philosophies, different people who were respecting each other. They could go one day to one temple, one day to another one. They were trading with another. They were exchanging philosophical ideas. So I'm really happy that I could talk with you also who come from Central Asia, and also that I could do my presentation with the Philippines. So it's the only really with Singapore together, or maybe Malaysia, a country where English is very fluent, so people have access to Western culture. So somehow they don't really, also in Asia, people don't really understand this connection. So that the ancient Greco-Bactrians and Central Asia, they are culturally also linked all the way to the Southern Silk Road and to the Northern Silk Road. So what my hope for the future is that people do a mutual understanding. So it's easy for me because I've been grown up in a foreign country in China. Then I traveled to Japan and to other countries. I was never in my own country, so I have adaptability with this kind of different of cultures and civilization. But it's also a work on oneself. It's not only about studying culture, because then you must be intelligent enough to not stick yourself to a monolithic block and try to understand the different beauties of this world in terms of civilization. So it's kind of like you see a landscape in Palawan or the Swiss mountains or Mediterranean landscape or a nice river in Central Asia. They're all beautiful in their own sense, but they have things in common. So that just they are beautiful and nice. So you don't need to destroy, hate, or close your eyes and become stiff in one civilization or religion, but try to understand all things as they were understood in the past. Curiosity is very important.
That's right. Absolutely agree with you. I think intellectual curiosity is the key that drives us. Doesn't matter how old we are, but for young people especially, don't kill your intellectual curiosity and don't push yourself in the sort of monolithic box of one thinking and narrow-minded sort of ontologies. We should really go out and explore and not be afraid to interact with different, with the other, and learn from it, and maybe find some similarities, and if there are some differences, maybe there is something can be improved in your own culture where you come from, in your own location, but also maybe you can bring some improvement to the new place wherever you come. I agree with you completely, Dr. Lucas. Also, if you have any recommendations or advice for young researchers of history, because we have some historians who are trying to research, and I know, especially working on ancient history, is a very challenging thing as a whole. So, what would you recommend to the young researchers, especially when they meet probably the great big walls of resistance to new ideas? How to
Okay.
manage it?
So I will recommend the Sino-Platonic papers of Victor Baer from the University of Pennsylvania. It's made by many scholars and researchers who have very open-minded ideas about historical themes of the world, including mainly the ones from Asia, Central Asia. And that's the papers that I will look at if I want to have a different perspective. Yeah, really, that's the paper that I will recommend to the young scholars. the Sino-Platonic papers.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Dr. Lucas. We have one more question here coming before closure. It seems that Hellenism didn't fully conquer the Central Asian culture at Silk Road. Instead, they're once being assimilated to the local cultures. Does this demonstrate the resilience of Central Asian culture influencing the world instead, not by military power, but by its esoteric way of life? In other words, we always think that military power is one of those most important things for the relations, especially in international relations. Now, the realism rules with the hard power of military, but at the same time, there was other ways. And is there examples that we can see really from ancient times that the esoteric way might rule? What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yes, so again, the Central Asian conquest of Alexander the Great and the other Greco-Bactrian kings was a military conquest, but it was different. Like, let's say, the English, British Empire in India, as I said, because of its multiculturalism and its curiosity. So even Alexander the Great, he saw the god Shiva, and then he think it was Dionysos. So both the Indians, they accepted this assimilation because they were living in the same cities, trade by trade. Only the people who block themselves in ethno-nationalism or ethnocentrism, then they say, okay, we are like this, we are not like that. But Alexander was the opposite. He was able, with his universalist mind, to include all the citizens of the world, to read the books in their libraries, to perform in theater, to do wrestling games, to have philosophical talks. This is a Greek universalism. Like today, Olympic Games, you compete by nations. It came from Greece, but it's adapted to every nation. So Greek culture itself is not separated from any culture of the world. It belongs to all mankind. It's what I think. And Indian culture is also international and belongs also to all mankind. So we can find a solution and philosophical interesting ideas in all cultures. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's important for conclusion to know that even Alexander the Great, considering that when he used military power, he didn't only conquered with the military alone, but actually there was some really interaction with the local
Yes.
cultures, especially with the Oxus, because Oxus civilization was there before Alexander had come,
Yes,
right?
he was very curious, and even the Indian wise man. So India became the spirituality center for the Greeks. Every people in quest of philosophy and in spirituality wanted to travel to India. A little bit like this, like today, you want to go to see the Asian master, or like I did myself in China, looking for the Chinese masters. And so it was the same in the past. The East had a large potential of wisdom because of this free mind. Again, they are not monolithic. They are very tolerant and open approach to ideas, all the Eastern world. So that's why they will make it in the future, because of their adaptability.
Yes, of course that's true, and considering even in the middle of that, we probably didn't mention it enough, but Persia and the Persian civilization was really interacting and with the Greek civilization and with the Scythian and Saka civilization, right? So we see it even before Alexander the Great. There was a warrior queen, Tomiris, right? That I think 6th century BC, right? Who defeated and killed Kyros the Great, and by that there was also it's not just the military battles mattered, but also the interaction that happened between the Scythians, Saka in the north, and the Persians, and on the other side we had also Persians interaction with the Greeks, right? So that interaction preceded Alexander the Great and made him probably for his generation more curious about the regions that represented the Persia at the time in Greece, right? So, yeah, so you're right, absolutely. We should encourage that intellectual curiosity, and we encourage finding, traveling, interacting, socializing, and exchanging our ideas as much as possible. Okay, thank you very much. I think we don't have any more questions. Would you like to say your final comments before we move to the closure of our
Yeah.
lecture?
So I would like to thank you and thank the UP Diliman University again for the presentation. So I hope I can see you again one day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas. We really enjoyed the lecture today. We learned a lot. Me personally, I learned a lot and really enjoyed it. It made me think and made me think to read more about ancient history as well. We thank you from the Asian Center about for this opportunity to hear this lecture. And now I will turn back to Lem for the closing part of our lecture. Lem.
All right. Thank you very much to Dr. Christopoulos for the very insightful lecture on Hellenism in East Asia. And of course, to Dr. Peleo for moderating the open forum. So to synthesize the lecture and and the the open forum discussions, and to formally conclude today's lecture, we are pleased to invite Dr. Aaron Jedrabena, Assistant Professor at the UP Asian Center, to deliver the synthesis and the closing remarks. So, Dr. Rabena.
Thank you very much, Lem. Good afternoon, everyone. Professor Lucas, Dean, Professor Ariel, Professor Elia, and we'd like to thank you again, Dr. Lucas, for the very enlightening, very interesting lecture. And we're honored to have you at the Asian Center. And history is very interesting indeed. I am not a historian, but I'm a fan of history. And we are where we are because of history. And this affects identities, economic activities, and even geopolitical constructs and strategies. In fact, when we look at contemporary diplomatic statements, you will always hear them talk about historical ties. And people to people ties, cultural interdependence have been there for thousands of years. And as we saw with Dr. Lucas's presentation, in fact, globalists would argue globalization had started very early on, even preceding the Westphalian concept of the nation state. With Dr. Lucas's lecture, we see that there is an interesting angle to the East-West interaction, particularly with the Hellenistic civilization playing a vital role in East-West ancient connectivity. So this complements the popular literature of the Roman Empire's links with the Han Dynasty, with the start of the Silk Road in the 130 BC, and way before Marco Polo's visit to China during the Yuan Dynasty. Both being very old civilizations, Greek and Chinese civilizations, were already very active during the Bronze Age. We saw this with the presentation of Dr. Lucas. And the Speleo scripture, early to civilization, and the Zhou state currency, the Minoan Labris currency, and therefore it is not surprising why the two had very early engagements. And then Professor Lucas also mentioned the role of Alexander the Great in further expanding and popularizing the Hellenistic influence. The general Seleucus, the Greco-Bactrians, the architecture like the Alexandria Olyxiana, Indo-Greek intermarriage, Greek Buddhists like Menandros and Demetrios, Alexandria on the Indus, artistic relics such as tapestries, and interestingly, he advances this idea of Emperor Qin Shi Huang's wife of being a mixed descent. And the use of the phalanx formation of the Greeks in Qin China, and the Qin and Greco-Bactrian interaction, particularly with the 12 giant foreign statues or Wongzhong in Chinese, appearing in China. There's also the Greek influence expansion from Central Asia, then from Central Asia serving as a keynote into China. And this became more pronounced during the time of Ho Chu Bing and Jiang Qian. And he says that presently, the Tuzhu people in Gansu province still maintain certain Dionysian rituals. And traces of Hellenistic influences can still be seen today in Japan, South Korea, and even Southeast Asia. So, in other words, stories like these remind us the eternal importance of positive intercultural and civilizational understanding, and the nobility of the transference of ideas. And his lecture, I would say, underscored not a clash of civilizations, but a harmony of civilizations. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and we hope to see you again in our future again. So let's give a warm round of applause again to Dr. Lucas, and more power to you, sir, in your research works. And perhaps we can have you again in the future. So have a good day, everyone. Yeah. Thank you, Lem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rabena, for the very comprehensive recap and synthesis and for closing the program. On behalf of the UP Asian Center, we extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Christopoulos for sharing his time, expertise, and perspectives. We also thank our participants for their engagement and for contributing to the richness of today's discussion. We hope that this lecture has deepened our understanding of the Silk Road as a space for cross-pollination between cultures throughout history and up until today. So as we conclude, we invite everyone to remain connected to the UP Asian Center by subscribing to its official channels and mailing lists. We regularly post updates and announcements on upcoming lectures, conferences, publications, and other academic activities. We encourage you to follow and engage with the Center's platforms as we continue to foster conversations on Asia and its global intersection. We also invite everyone to help us improve our future events by answering the evaluation form for this event. The link and QR code for the form is now flashed on your screens. So once again, we thank you all very much for joining us today and for being part of this fruitful public lecture. This formally concludes our program. Have a pleasant day and we hope to see you again in future events.